Okay. Thanks everyone for joining. This is the first time we are having someone present the book, and then we'll go with our regular reflection and discussion. Thanks, Roshni, for taking this opportunity. Uh, so over to you, Roshni.
So this is also my first time doing something like this. So I might be a bit all over the place. Has anybody else read the book?
I am on the second chapter, I think.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Just
me too. In this, I just start the second chapter. I
yeah.
finished first chapter, but it's interesting.
Yes. Yes. So for me too, I have read this in the last 2, 3 weeks, but I found it very fascinating. Also very close to what I've been working with myself. So it was interesting to go through that and compare it to what I'm doing with myself. So it was very interesting. So the book is The Human Behind the Coach. And as the book name suggests, it is kind of focusing on the person rather than what you bring in as a coach to the what you do as a coach in a session. It focuses more on who you are as a human being. That is the crux of the book. Memon, I would love if you want to pitch in at some point on whatever points comes up. It was difficult to kind of summarize it. It's a lot of things, and I was finding everything's very interesting. But I have kind of tried to pick up the most important parts of it. Uh, so one, it starts with saying that to be a master coach, it is important to learn the artfulness of coaching and not just the process of coaching. We are, as ICF coaches specifically, taught a lot of techniques that the process that we need to follow to coach, but the book kind of emphasizes on bringing the person more, who you are, the connect you have with the client. And very interestingly, the authors call the client thinker throughout the book, which I found very interesting because they're emphasizing on the process of thinking that happens throughout the session for the client. So that is what makes this a bit more deeper than the usual following the competencies or following models in coaching. It makes it different in the sense that it goes more deeper into connecting with who you are when you are with your client. I would like to ask you guys here before we go ahead, if you had to define coaching in one word, what would that word be for you?
Partner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the word that came to my mind as well, partner.
Okay.
Partnering.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
In coaching, I think she said that what I took from there that I really love is that coaching is the art of improvisation. I like that. When do you do improvisation is when you don't know, you're okay to not know, and you don't know, and you're willing to ask the dumbest of questions. She was saying the word she used, that you're willing to ask the dumbest of questions because you don't assume anything. The mind of a child, the curiosity of a child. A child always asks you the dumbest of question, the silliest of question. Yeah. So that's the curiosity of a child.
Oh, Memon, you put it very perfectly in terms of what the book says. Uh, you know, it's completely negating the importance of the coach in a way, that you carry as a coach. It's not in the partnership that you're not important, but the importance you give yourself in the session. So to be able to be childlike, have that curiosity, ask the dumbest of questions, that comes from that space. And that is something they beautifully explained in this. So the book divides itself into two parts. I'll talk more about the first part. The second part I'll just touch upon because there's lots in the book. But I felt that I personally enjoyed the first part a lot, the human within. And the second part is the human between. We'll go in detail about what each of this means and what it consists of. So when we look at humanity within, so what they're talking about here is that the coach has to look within themselves. The process of coaching is not coming from the right kind of questions to ask, but who are you appearing as in that conversation, in that room, on that call? That is of utmost importance. And that is the work you need to do on yourself to become that masterful coach. And they, for going within, they have given 6 different parameters on which you can kind of explore yourself on these qualities and kind of improve, or rather keep reflecting until you improve or reach that place you want to be with these 6 parameters. So the first quality they talk about is silence. I'll go into each of these individually, but just to look at the list, the silence, there is silence that you bring to the conversation. There is control and not knowing. By control and not knowing, they are saying letting go of the control, basically. Humility, it is, as they describe, one of the qualities that's never touched upon in the ICF competencies, but how important it is to bring humility into your conversation. There's vulnerability, which we do talk about in other contexts, how important it is to be vulnerable, but we don't talk about it as a coach. We want to control that part. We don't want to be seen as a vulnerable person in a coaching conversation when we are the coach. But they talk about how that is also a challenge in bringing yourself very purely into a coaching conversation. There is distance and there is courage and insight. I'll just touch upon all these and we can look at certain questions that can come up in this. So with silence, the book talks about 2 kinds of silence. One is the outer silence and the other is the inner silence. So outer silence is very obvious. Does anybody want to put in their thoughts about it? What does outer silence mean in a coaching conversation for a coach?
Talking less.
It's also about using a lot of silence in the conversation. So using pauses when the client is talking. If you have noticed, there is a tendency for us as coaches to kind of quickly start thinking, okay, what is the important part that's happening here? And what is the next question I'm supposed to ask? In that, you are not ready to give that pause or silence. You want to pick up something interesting that's come up while the client is talking. So the outer silence is allowing that space and time for the client to reflect. And they say that in this time is where most work happens. That is the main part that the coach kind of brings in a coaching conversation. And there is the chapter is quite long, actually. They talk in detail about silence. So about outer silence specifically, they do talk about how much of silence is the right kind of silence. And then there is a example they give here about a research which says that in UK and Ireland, about 4 seconds of silence, people start getting uncomfortable. So culturally, silence can mean something. So you, as a coach, need to be attuned to the client to understand. Whereas in Japan, up to 8 seconds of silence is very comfortable. Though it's a few seconds, but in a coaching conversation, I'm sure as coaches, you can imagine this is such a powerful time difference. 4 second and 8 second. Even if for 4 seconds, a client is starting to feel uncomfortable with the silence, you know what happens as a coach for you. You can sense it in that conversation. So there are a lot of parameters that you need to be present to in the conversation to use that outer silence properly. It can't be too long. It can't be too short to create that balance. How do you think that balance can be created? We talked about presence, but what part of presence would bring to you as a coach the right balance on how much silence to use?
This is where your observation also, because there are verbal language and there are non-verbal language. So have a look at the body language. What is the body language saying?
Yeah. And that could mean they're looking at you or they are looking away thinking, which means they are still thinking. You can give more space. There are a lot of examples they've given in the book, but to name a few, when the client starts looking at you, thinking you're going to ask something now, the client is kind of uncomfortable with that silence at this point. So that is reading the nonverbal, like Maimon said, reading the nonverbal and reciprocating accordingly. That's the important part of outer silence. Whereas inner silence is the thoughts we have within ourselves while the client is talking. It can be, I know personally for me, right now I'm recording for my PCC and, the competencies are so often on my mind and I want to pick a metaphor or I want to, do a certain part of my competency to show I'm doing it. The thought that goes at that point into what is it I should do now? And that is where you lose the connection with the client. To keep the connection on, you need to have inner silence as much as outer silence. You have to keep away from, okay, if a client says a particular thing, I have probably experienced that in my life. So I will start thinking, okay, I know where this conversation is going, even for a fraction of a second, but you'll be surprised if you do not let that judgment come in and you ask a very neutral question you will be surprised to see that the response would be very different from what you experienced in your life, though the situation to start with was very similar to what you were thinking about. They give here an example also. The author talks about a situation where she was coaching a client, and something like this did come up where the client said something and she said, "Oh, I know this. I know where they are going." But they chose to ask a very neutral question like, what would you like to do with what's coming up for you? Had they said anything about, what they were thinking, then the direction would have been very different. But because they asked a neutral question, the direction was completely different. And the client came up with a very different solution for the problem. This is very important. And it will come up not just in silence, but in other parameters that they have talked about. But it is very interesting to see how it plays out when you are able to keep yourself out of that equation. Sorry. Just to take you ahead. Sorry.
Roshini, would you like me to
Yes.
help you? There's sometimes there are some in the chat, the comments in the chat. Would you like it to be set
Oh,
up?
sure. Yeah, because
Okay.
I'm not able to. Okay. Let me continue this. Is there something right now, Memon?
You've already covered it.
Okay. So why is silence powerful in coaching? I found this part of the book to be most interesting. They've given it in a lot of detail. I did not cover all of that because we have a time restriction today. But this part, I found it, they've gone so much. And that is, I think, the USP of this book in a way. They make you think a lot. There are a lot in each of these sections. For example, in silence also, they have different topics under silence, like we talked about inner and outer silence, but even under that there are different things that come. Everywhere they ask you questions. There are parts in this book where they have sections called questions to think about, and under that they have 2-3 questions which you can reflect on. Also, they give you another space where they tell you what you can do with a peer. Look at this with a peer, which is a section where they tell, observe a recording or something, a recording, and then go through where you have used silence or where you could have used silence. I'll talk more about that also. Why silence is powerful in coaching. Create space for clients to process their thoughts. That's the first thing we said. Okay, this is an important point. Reduces the coach's impulse to rescue or fix. We usually have a tendency to wanting to take the client to a good place. When the client brings in a problem or a goal that the client wants to reach, we want to make sure that in the session, the client has reached that place. But when we do that, when we go into the rescue or fix mode, you're losing the partnership. That one word, which some of you mentioned, is the most important word. That goes away the moment you are trying to do that. You are becoming the rescuer, which is a higher place than, somebody who is being rescued. So it's important. Silence is also important to kind of keep in check if you're still partnering. It strengthens deep listening and presence, encourages self-awareness in both coach and client. Now, what are the challenges of silence in coaching? I personally have this I find it very difficult to fill in that. I want to fill in that gap when a pause happens. What is probably you could share with me what are the challenges you find with silence or having used silence in coaching? Have you tried using silence consciously in a coaching session? Any of you?
Yeah, sometimes I think there is a discomfort where you don't know whether should I talk or should I just let them be. That's the confusion sometimes it happens, and then you have to observe them while they are talking and observe their body language. And so the last time when I was taking a session, the pause was really long because the person was the client was thinking a lot and also writing down certain things. So I had to just let them be. And after the session, she actually came out and said that I love that silence and the space that you gave. But it was a little bit confusing because I didn't know whether should I talk or should I just let her be.
Hmm. Hmm. It's very interesting. So, uh, the fact that we most of the times we are also coaching online. The chapter also talks about what is your body language when you are using silence. Like if you're using silence, but if I suddenly move closer to the screen, I just change this from this. There is a possibility the client will be distracted and start thinking that, oh, the coach wants to say something to me now. So they will, there is a natural tendency for the client to think that you are superior. You're the one who's gonna lead the conversation. So the moment your gesture or your facial expression, even a sound from your from you can actually distract the client from thinking and focusing on what do you want from them. So as we practice, it's very important to be conscious of how we are playing it out. Vidya, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that that silence is very magical. Uh, when you're in that silence and pause, it feels that you are in one zone with the client. You don't feel that you are in a different zone, and you exactly know where they are coming from and where you should talk, and you just hit right there. So I just wanted to say how magical it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know this is something I need to work as a coach because I feel I'm wasting time. I have this fear that, I'm wasting the client's time by not talking right now, which is so, uh, again, me believing that I have to do something for this coaching session to work. And we come to it in the one of the next categories that are there. The urge to add value through words. This is what I have problems with. Managing our own internal noise, doubts, assumptions, or the need to prove ourselves. We may be like Vidya, you were saying you were confused, right? So thinking in that moment, oh, am I supposed to talk now? And if I'm supposed to talk, what is the right thing to say? You're constantly going, and then you're probably picking, and what you pick up after the silence will kind of change also the trajectory of the thoughts that the client was having. You don't know. The client hasn't spoken after that silence, right? If you at this point interrupt, what will happen is the client will then follow your lead, leave the thoughts that they were having. So that's quite a dicey place to be in. So there were a lot of questions that were part of the lesson, but I picked up something that would kind of summarize the questions. As a coach, it's good to look at how comfortable am I with both outer and inner silence in my coaching conversations. That is something we can take away in from this particular chapter on silence, that to reflect on what silence shows up as in your coaching conversations. Yeah. Anything you want to add here? Any of you?
I think the outer silence is easier to act on. It's the inner silence is difficult, the most difficult. And she did mention something about how do you practice getting into that inner silence by letting go, by being present, non-judgmental, and be curious, be kind. That's where the humility comes in.
Yes.
And most importantly, be present and listen. That
Listen. Yes.
listening, that's how you train yourself, your inner silence. That's how you train, I call it, to reduce the noises in my head.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. When you said this, I remembered even a reaction, like they had this example where even a ah or a depending on the energy you are showing through that, the client may feel, okay, this is something I should pay attention to, or I said something wrong, you know. They can pick that from your energy. You might have very subconsciously done it, but the client can pick that from you. So that's so it's good to kind of I found that very interesting advice, that to, and they suggest to look at video recordings, not audio recordings, so that you're able to see your own expressions, what is coming up. And that is quite an important takeaway, I felt. The second is control and not knowing.
Correct. And I mentioned that sounds might be interpreted as judgment.
Yes, yes, very much. Yeah.
Actually, your
Yeah,
facial
sometimes we are
expression will be
struggling.
also. Yeah, suddenly, if as a coach and suddenly you smile, or so the client look at you and suddenly you show a different facial expression, that it could stop the client from thinking.
Yeah, yeah. So we have to be first aware of what's coming from us. It can't be a subconscious process. Shampa, you were
Yeah,
saying something?
yeah. The thing is, as for the inner silence, sometimes I feel that if I am just showing that, yes, I'm with you, I'm sometimes, yeah. But yes, sometimes maybe it is like I'm listening. I have a feeling that I'm showing them that I'm listening, but maybe it is how Memon is said that maybe it is little disturbing, but maybe they will think that I am uh, with I'm listening, and at the same time maybe I'm appreciating, okay, what you are saying is correct. But for me, I am using it as a, just that, yes, I'm listening. Yeah. Like that, but maybe that is also not good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that needs practice to stop that.
So
I
the
yeah, I guess
idea is we are there to serve the client, so we need to be aware of where we are at that point of time.
I guess there's a question here. If silence is good, but there can be a time. I wonder if there can be a time when you actually overdo silence, in the sense that if you don't do which is typically seen as acknowledgement, at least to show that you're present and you're there with the client. And if you don't say anything, it might at one point turn towards being seen as being passive, a passive listener. And so I wonder if there is a sense of balance that is required in terms of how much you stay silent and how much you talk.
Absolutely. And that is the point that they do mention, that that's why presence becomes such an important factor when you're using silence. You need to learn, like Vidya just said, she saw the client making notes of something, right? At that point, had she started talking, it would have distracted. So kind of also reading the nonverbal is very important. That's why we talked about, culturally also silence can mean different things to different people, and individually also it can mean something. I think I personally have a tendency to fill in silence. Even if I am a client, if the coach is silent, I feel, oh, the coach wants me to say something right now, and I'm thinking what to say, until unless I really wanted to think. So, but the coach has to be attuned to the client in a way that they're able to, and that comes with practice. That comes with that's why that reflective exercise becomes very important. And also now the second topic, the control part and not knowing, you know so not knowing that if silence, how much silence I need to take to the conversation today. I don't know yet. It is going to come when that moment presents itself. I think, did I answer what you asked?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think until we at least get it, and that I guess is it requires a lot of mastery over yourself and then the situation and letting go of much things. Maybe you can even ask a question to the client when you're in doubt to say, well, hang on, should I just keep quiet for a minute? You're thinking about something, or do you want me to add something here? Maybe that just a question there. I wonder if that might help in our journey before we get to mastery.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it is a process, definitely. It is like when we are starting as coaches, our focus is completely on the competencies. Am I getting this competency in? Am I getting the other competency in? We're focusing on the right kind of questions to ask. A lot of times we have a question bank with us. But in this book, they say that that's not, then you're not with the client. You have already decided, okay, if this comes up, I'll ask this question. If this comes up, or you have a certain pattern of questions that you typically ask, then you're already prepared for a conversation that you had no idea about. So they emphasize in this book that to really make an impact to the human, to become that human behind the coach, you have to bring in these elements. And at certain points, like when we come to humility, they do talk about humility not being talked about at all in competencies. Humility is not discussed at all. But that is such an important part of connection, of letting somebody else lead in the conversation. But I'll first go with this part, control and not knowing. So control is the desire to steer the conversation, find solutions, or drive outcomes, which is typically what.
Roshni,
Yes.
there are some comments in the chat also. Do you mind if I read it out for you? Or
Of course. Of course.
okay, Anna says sound might be interpreted as judgment. And you can use tell me more if you are doing phone coaching or verbal cues are important. Also, you can contact with them how to reply if no video or F2F is face to face is involved. So that is Anna. And
Like,
okay,
yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So I just want to say that again, it's very situational. They have explained it in much detail. Silence itself is talked about in detail, how you can, look at different aspects of silence in your own self as a coach. In different circumstances, like if it's a telephonic conversation, if it's a face-to-face conversation via vis-a-vis online thing. Like I said, if on an online thing, even if I move closer to the screen, the client will read it in a different way. If I'm face to face, where I sit, where I place myself, they even at one point say that placing yourself a little in an angle kind of lets the client feel less intimidated by your presence too close. Sometimes clients can even feel that, which is, they say, an advantage in an online thing, because eye contact, for as an example, it will sometimes feel very intimidating in a face-to-face conversation. But in a screen, I could continuously keep the eye contact, but it won't feel as awkward, because the client can still look away and, very subtly also look away. Or even if you are subtly looking away, it won't be very obvious that you're not making the eye contact. So it depends on the circumstance also. That's why you have to be present and change according to what the situation is. As can I agree with Anna on the sound being, it can bring that judgment. Jissy, was there another question or comment?
Yeah, one more. I don't know the name. So it also depends on the tone we use from the beginning when we do speak. Contracting and partnering runs throughout. So this was the next comment.
Yeah, they touch upon that part in the second part of the book, the human between. That's where they touch about the partnership and things like that. So here, what they are talking about in control and not knowing is basically that you have to come to a coaching conversation believing that you don't know, completely putting that guard down and saying that I don't know what's coming up today. Everything I've learned, I mean, you might be a master of your techniques, but you don't know today what's coming up and what's the next question or what's the question after that you're going to ask. You have no idea. You have to just let go of that feeling as a coach. Why embracing not knowing matters in coaching is it shifts coaching from problem solving to deeper exploration. Coaching the who of the client rather than the what of the client. Not focusing as a coach on the solution, if the client is going to get solution by the end of the session. This is very related to you coming in, I don't know what's coming up today. The coach may just not, it might be a 45-minute session and you must have finished 35 minutes and you're nowhere near closing. And to say that it's okay, this is how this today's conversation is going, to be able to say that. And a lot of time we fear, if you look at the challenges of letting go of control, the problem is we fear that we'll not be valuable to the client. The client might think, oh, this coach charged so much from me and now there's nothing that has come out. These are all your thoughts as a coach. The client may feel anything, but that's not on you. You as a coach come here not knowing. And that is when it's more powerful, because then like I said, they use the word thinker throughout the book for the client. The thinker is the client, not you. So any part of thinking that needs to come has to come from, you are just there to facilitate that journey. Again, here they say the urge to fill silences or guide conversations. We don't want to kind of be the person who is leading through our questioning, leading the conversation to a certain place. We want the client to think where they want to go next. So to practice this, they talk about how can I practice trusting the coaching process instead of trying to direct it. I do, again, again, looking at how often do you think as a coach that I need to bring the client to a good conclusion, with what they are doing. We go to humility in coaching. This section I really enjoyed reading a lot. It is the ability to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers and the client is the expert of their own life. We may want to use, we may have a kitty of tools we are ready with. We may think, okay, this is what I am good at in coaching, and I'm going to use my strength here to prove that, I'm good as a coach. But it's not about you. To let go of that ego that comes in. The ego as a coach is that I am very good at this and I am going to bring this client where the client needs to reach. When that happens, in humility, they talk about how you let go of the partnering part. The partnering is there, but the story is truly about the client, not about you. Though you are partnering, the story is not about you. You are partnering in the client's story. So the example they give here is that you are actually the backstage. The spotlight is truly on the client. And that is something you should never forget. So as a backstage person, there are different, I should never be the person who's shining with asking the right question. No, I asked this beautiful question and now the client is able to move ahead. The focus is not that. But again, when they're talking about humility, they're not saying that you can't think you are good at what you do. That's not the intention. But the focus of the conversation should not be that you're good at what you do. Am I making sense? Memon, would you like to add about humility?
Yeah, when I was taking up coach training, my facilitator used to say, relax, it's not your show. You don't have to perform here. Nobody is interested in your performance. It is the client's performance.
Yes.
This
So,
this concept ties
yeah.
in neatly with the first two, doesn't it? Like silence and giving
Yes.
up control basically is about humility, isn't it? Because it's not about you talking or trying to control the outcome.
And that is something I liked about the book, how each of those chapters connect with each other, come together. But you need to, like how when we do the competencies, right? They say the best way to learn your competencies is to take one at a time, practice that, get it into you. Similarly, they have approached the whole being human as a coach in that manner. They've categorized it and then told you that, okay, if you want to improve or look at yourself, start with looking at yourself. So they have these questions that say, look at how, these questions are going to help you look at yourself. Then they give you questions that you can reflect with a peer. Then they give you certain practices that you can go through. So each of these categories that they've put the book into, they go through it in detail, but you will see as you read that everything is so interconnected. Humility had a lot. Like I said, this book is really beautiful. So I had a lot of points, but I had to kind of put in very few things out of it.
Roshni, just a quick time check. Another 10 minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll just go through. After this one, I have just put the pointers. We can then maybe 5-10 minutes, we can discuss what is coming up for each of you. So in this about humility, am I coaching with humility to let my client lead their own journey? Am I putting myself, or I am letting the client lead the thing? This leading thing we'll again touch upon in the partnership, and there is a topic on dance, coaching as a dance. We'll get there. Vulnerability, I think we do talk about as coaches, but it is also the vulnerability of not knowing that they are emphasizing on. So there can be certain times, like Memon was saying, I asked a dumb question. And it's okay. It's okay. Sometimes, you messed up in between a coaching conversation, and to tell yourself that it's okay. Or to ask a question and then realize, I asked a very closed-ended question. I want to change this. So you rephrase the question and ask. It's okay to do that. And vulnerability comes with showing. So here they talk about the coach not being a person who is completely sorted. That is why has come to this space to sort other people. No, that's not the truth. We also know that there are a lot of things that happens in our lives. And to be accepting and coming up and showing yourself as that. That is vulnerability in coaching. Here I've only mentioned the fear, challenges, fear of not seeming professional or competent, the discomfort of not having all the answers, instinct to hide behind structure, tools, and expertise. So we have a tendency to bring in a tool or try something different when we don't know what to do. But it's okay to say, I don't know. And you can even ask a question like, okay, I hear this. What would you like to do? Just put that question. If you don't know what to ask, you can ask the client where the client wants to go next. You don't really have to bring something fancy to hide behind. Distance is mainly about holding that space without getting too attached to the client's emotions. Here they talk a lot about emotional intelligence, and not be too distant, because empathy is important, presence is important. The client has to feel that you really care, but not so much that you are involved in the client's story. So you have to maintain that balance here. That is the topic on distance. Again, the challenges that are there is the urge to solve problem. Get attached to clients' success or struggle to reach the goal. And confusing empathy with over-involvement. Empathy has to be there for the connection and presence to be there for the client to feel safe, but not overdoing it and getting involved into the client story. Courage and insight is about asking the right kind of questions, even if that means you're challenging the client. You're challenging the client's perspectives or beliefs without feeling discomfort of doing it. And insight is again somewhere depending a lot on your intuition. A lot of times, why do you pick a certain word when you rephrase and ask the next question is because you intuitively felt that this is what is important, right? So to also depend on that, to depend on intuition and also ask those questions through new innovative ways. If you're not sure if that is what you want, it's okay to ask the client if that's what they want to look at. So using your insight and asking courageous questions, challenging the client. The humanity between part I've just covered with this slide. It's about partnership, the dance, music and words again is two different chapters, and trust. Partnership, we know about keeping yourself equal throughout the conversation, but also remembering what we did earlier, that the story is about the client, not about you. You are partnering to support that story, to not make it about yourself, but about the client, but you are there. You're continuously there with the client. That's partnership. That's how you effectively collaborate. The dance and music, it's very beautifully put, those chapters. How the coaching, so what we were talking about, knowing when to use silence, knowing when to pause, knowing what is the right kind of question, knowing how to use your non-verbal cues to guide the client. The dance and the music is about that, the tone. Somebody mentioned about the tone of uh, asking questions, or how you talk can decide. Music is about that, the pitch, the tune that you have, and all this they do talk about in the same pattern of asking those questions, reflecting on those questions, doing a peer study with watching your own recording, to see these different aspects of the human between.
Roshni, just a
Take-
quick time check. Another 4 minutes,
Yeah.
we need to wrap up.
Yes, we done. So the book closes with talking about using recordings for reflective practice. This is something they suggest throughout the book, and they have a chapter specifically on that, talking about how it's important to take, like I said, use even video recordings, take them to mentor coaching sessions, look at it together on different aspects of what they have talked about. These are just some questions I put across, and probably next 5 minutes we can just discuss what's coming up for everybody and what's your takeaway from what you heard about the book.
Can I just add two things that I feel encapsulates the whole book, is that the mindset of a coach, and that when you go in for the coaching, he said the word that she used was what is the least I need to do today for this person to feel seen and heard and have new insights in their own stuff. So that was, I thought it was very, very powerful. And she also said that the goal of coaching is not to make someone feels good. The goal is to break through a person guise of knowing. Because I think this is where you have to have the, it's not about making them feel good, but it's making them feel to break through.
Yes.
Okay. So we just got
Anything?
2 more
Yeah.
minutes, maybe one more person if they want to come and share their views. It's okay.
So for me, I'm Tapan. So for me, what is coming at this stage is, the most important part is courage, because whatever, speaker has covered, whether it is silence or, not knowing, not controlling, humility, maintaining a distance, everything initiates from courage. You need to have courage to be silent, to be there, to not ask question, to be, accepting the uncertainty. So in that way, I think for me, the point is, at every stage of coaching process, be in that state of courage and in a state of vulnerability. That's coming for me.
I think one quote that comes to me is, when you break the egg from outside and when the egg cracks from within, those are two different outcomes to that, right? So you need to kind of let that client break that shell and come out. As a coach, you need to always remember that part.
Excellent
100%.
metaphor. So we are on top of the hour. Thank you for the excellent book review or book summary, Roshni. Um, Looking at it, I'm getting more ideas on how to change the way we do these big book club meetings. We'll discuss on the group.
Sure.
Thank you everyone for joining.
A lot.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
Bye.
Roshni, for covering beautiful summary.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Roshni. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshni. Thank you so much. Bye.